Dr. Sarah Chun pressed her palm against the sealed viewport of the medical bay, watching the stars streak past in brilliant lines of light. The U.S. Mercy's Promise hummed quietly around her, its engines carrying them toward the Kepler 442 system where the latest xenocide reports had originated. As Chief Medical Officer of the Galactic Aid Coalition, Sarah had seen her share of horrors across the galaxy. But something about this mission felt different. "Doctor, we're receiving a priority transmission from Coalition Command," announced Lieutenant Torres from the bridge comm. Sarah straightened her white coat with the Red Cross insignia and made her way to the communications center. Admiral Harrison's weathered face appeared on the holographic display, his expression grim. "Dr. Chun, I'm afraid the situation on Kepler 442b has deteriorated significantly since your departure. The Zephyrian Collective has escalated their attacks on civilian populations." Sarah's stomach tightened. The Zephyrians were known for their ruthless efficiency in warfare, but they had always maintained some semblance of honor when it came to noncombatants. "What's the current casualty count, Admiral?" "Over 2 million dead in the past week alone. The Altarian colonies are being systematically eliminated. But that's not why I'm contacting you directly." Harrison paused, his jaw clenching. "Intelligence reports indicate the Zephyrians have begun targeting medical personnel and facilities specifically." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. In the 3 centuries since humanity had joined the Galactic Council, certain rules of engagement had become sacred. Medical personnel, marked with the Universal Red Cross symbol, were considered non-combatants under the Galactic Geneva Convention. Even the most aggressive species respected this fundamental law of warfare. "That's impossible," Sarah whispered. "No species has violated medical neutrality since the Rigel Wars 200 years ago." "I'm transmitting the evidence now," Harrison replied. The hologram shifted to show surveillance footage from Altarian medical stations. Sarah watched in growing horror as Zephyrian fighters deliberately targeted hospitals, their plasma cannons turning healing centers into crematoriums. She saw medics with their hands raised in surrender, the Red Cross clearly visible on their uniforms, being gunned down by Zephyrian ground forces. "My God," she breathed, her hands trembling. "There's more," Harrison continued. "Yesterday, they hit the refugee medical camp on Altaria Prime. Dr. Marcus Webb and his entire team of 43 medical professionals were executed after being taken prisoner. The Zephyrians broadcast it as a warning to other medical personnel." Sarah had known Marcus personally. He was a brilliant surgeon who had dedicated his life to treating war refugees regardless of their species. The thought of him and his team being murdered in cold blood made her physically ill. "What are our orders, Admiral?" she asked, though part of her already knew the answer would change everything. Harrison's expression darkened further. "Continue with your mission to provide medical aid to Altarian refugees. However, you need to understand that the moment you enter that system, you become a target. The Zephyrians have made it clear that they consider medical personnel legitimate military objectives. And what is the human coalition's response to this violation of galactic law?" Harrison was quiet for a long moment, and Sarah could see something dangerous flickering in his eyes. "Officially, we're filing formal protests with the Galactic Council and demanding immediate sanctions against the Zephyrian Collective. And unofficially, Dr. Chun, you need to know that certain elements within humanity have taken an interest in this situation. Elements that we thought we had left behind when we joined galactic civilization." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She knew exactly what Harrison was referring to. When humanity had first made contact with alien civilizations and learned about the Galactic Council, there had been extensive debates about which aspects of human culture to suppress or abandon. Some of humanity's more violent traditions and organizations had been officially disbanded, their members integrated into legitimate military and civilian roles. But Sarah, like most humans in positions of authority, knew that these groups hadn't simply vanished. They had gone underground, waiting for the day when their particular skills might be needed again. "The War Crimes Tribunal veterans?" she asked quietly. Harrison nodded grimly. "Among others, Dr. Chun, for 3 centuries, humanity has played by galactic rules. We've been the peaceful species, the mediators, the healers. We've shown the galaxy our best face and hidden our darker nature. But The Zephyrians have just crossed a line that awakens something in us that we've kept carefully locked away. The transmission was interrupted by an urgent alert from the ship's navigation officer. Doctor, we're detecting multiple Zephyrian warships on an intercept course. They're broadcasting a warning for us to turn back or be destroyed. Sarah looked at the tactical display showing the approaching enemy vessels. The Mercy's Promise was a hospital ship, clearly marked with massive Red Cross symbols and broadcasting medical neutrality codes on all frequencies. By every law of galactic warfare, they should have been untouchable. Admiral, it appears we're about to become targets ourselves, Sarah reported. Harrison's expression hardened into something that reminded Sarah why humans had once been feared across their home galaxy, before they had learned to present a more civilized face to the cosmos. Dr. Chun, you and your crew are under my direct protection. Continue your mission. And Doctor? Yes, Admiral. Document everything. Every violation, every casualty, every atrocity. Because I have a feeling that very soon, the galaxy is going to remember why humanity was once considered the most dangerous species in known space. The communication ended, leaving Sarah staring at the approaching Zephyrian ships. Around her, the medical staff went about their preparations with professional calm, but she could see the fear in their eyes. They all knew what it meant to be targeted while wearing the Red Cross. Dr. James Morton, her second-in-command, approached with a grim expression. Sarah, the crew is asking if we should arm ourselves. The ship does have defensive weapons. Sarah shook her head. No. The moment we activate weapons systems, we lose our protected status under galactic law. We maintain medical neutrality no matter what. Even if it gets us all killed. She looked out at the stars again, thinking about Marcus Webb and his murdered team. James, sometimes dying for your principles is the only way to prove they matter. But, more importantly, sometimes the galaxy needs to see exactly what kind of monsters they're dealing with. The first Zephyrian plasma blast struck their port hull, causing the ship to shudder. Emergency alarms began wailing as the bridge reported minimal damage to non-essential systems. It was a warning shot, but the message was clear. This is Captain Vextar of the Zephyrian War Fleet, came a harsh, artificial voice over the communications system. Human medical vessel, you will withdraw from this system immediately or face destruction. Medical personnel are no longer granted safe passage in collective space. Sarah activated the ship's communication array. This is Dr. Sarah Chun of the UES Mercy's Promise, operating under galactic medical neutrality protocols. We are responding to humanitarian crisis and request safe passage to Alteria Prime. Negative, human. Your species' medical interference ends now. You have 30 seconds to alter course, or we will open fire. Sarah looked around the bridge at her crew. These were doctors, nurses, medical technicians, and support staff who had dedicated their lives to healing. They didn't deserve to die for the crime of trying to help refugees. All hands, this is Dr. Chun, she announced over the ship's intercom. We are about to come under attack by Zephyrian forces. I want everyone to know that what we do here today matters. The galaxy is watching. History is watching. We represent the ideal that medical personnel should be protected, that healing should be sacred, that even in war there must be some lines that cannot be crossed. The countdown reached 0, and the Zephyrian ships opened fire in earnest. Plasma beams tore through the Mercy's Promise, overwhelming their limited shields. The medical bay where Sarah had been standing moments before was vaporized in a blast of superheated energy. Emergency bulkheads sealed automatically, but the ship was mortally wounded. In the chaos that followed, Sarah found herself helping evacuate wounded crew members to the escape pods, all while the ship's emergency beacon broadcast their medical status and the fact that they were under deliberate attack. As her own escape pod ejected from the dying hospital ship, Sarah watched through the small viewport as the Zephyrians methodically destroyed the remaining pods one by one. She closed her eyes and activated her personal recorder. This is Dr. Sarah Chun, Chief Medical Officer, Galactic Aid Coalition. The date is November 15th, 2387. I am recording this as a witness to war crimes committed against medical personnel by the Zephyrian Collective. The UES Mercy's Promise, a clearly marked hospital ship operating under medical neutrality, has been destroyed with all hands. Approximately 200 medical professionals have been murdered in violation of the Galactic Geneva Convention. An explosion rocked her pod as a near miss from Zephyrian weapons lit up the darkness. Sarah continued recording. To whoever receives this message, the Zephyrians have declared war on the very concept of medical neutrality. They have chosen to target healers, to murder those who dedicate their lives to preserving life across all species. This cannot stand. This will not stand. Her escape pod systems began failing as Zephyrian fighters moved in for the kill. Sarah thought about Admiral Harrison's words, about the darker elements of humanity that had been kept hidden for 3 centuries. The Zephyrians think they understand humanity, she continued, her voice steady despite the approaching death. They think we're weak because we choose healing over violence, because we've spent 300 years trying to be the galaxy's doctors and diplomats. They're about to learn that we chose to be healers. That doesn't mean we forgot how to be killers. The last thing Sarah Chun saw was the brilliant flash of plasma fire as her escape pod was vaporized. But her message had already been transmitted on emergency frequencies, spreading across human space at the speed of light. Within hours, the recording would reach Earth. It would be played in emergency sessions of the Human Colonial Parliament, in the war rooms of the Solar Defense Force, and in the underground meetings of organizations that officially didn't exist. The Zephyrians had just made the greatest strategic mistake in galactic history. They had reminded humanity why their ancestors had once been the most feared predators on a planet full of deadly creatures. And now, for the first time in 3 centuries, humanity was going to remember what they really were underneath all their civilization and restraint. The galaxy was about to meet the species that had turned warfare into an art form, that had written books on the systematic destruction of enemies, that had refined cruelty and violence into sciences. The healers were dead. Now it was time for the killers to wake up. The emergency session of the Human Colonial Parliament had been in progress for 18 hours straight. Representatives from across human space filled the chamber, their faces grim as they watched Dr. Sarah Chen's final transmission for the 100th time. The holographic recording ended with the brilliant flash of plasma fire, and the chamber fell silent once again. Director Elena Vasquez of the Solar Intelligence Service stood at the central podium, her hands clasped behind her back. At 65, she carried herself with the bearing of someone who had seen humanity's darkest secrets and learned to live with them. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice cutting through the silence. In the past 72 hours, we have documented 47 separate attacks on medical personnel by Zephyrian forces. 233 doctors, nurses, and medical technicians have been murdered. 18 hospital ships have been destroyed. The Zephyrians have made it clear that they consider medical neutrality void when it comes to human personnel. Representative Chun from the Mars colonies stood up. Director Vasquez, what is the current response from the Galactic Council? Vasquez's expression darkened. The Council has issued a formal condemnation and called for a committee to investigate the allegations. They estimate the investigation will take 18 months to complete. A murmur of anger rippled through the chamber. Everyone present knew that the galactic bureaucracy moved at a glacial pace, prioritizing procedure over action. Meanwhile, Vasquez continued, the Zephyrians continue their systematic extermination of Altarian colonies. Intelligence estimates suggest they will achieve complete xenocide within 6 months unless someone intervenes. Representative Singh from the Europa stations raised his hand. What about our conventional military response? Surely the Solar Defense Force can handle one species of genocidal fanatics. Admiral Harrison, who had been sitting silently in the military section, finally stood. The Solar Defense Force is prepared to deploy, but we face significant tactical challenges. The Zephyrians have superior numbers and technology. A conventional military response would likely result in heavy casualties and uncertain outcomes. The chamber erupted in frustrated arguments. Some representatives called for immediate military action regardless of the costs. Others demanded that humanity work through galactic diplomatic channels. Still others suggested evacuating human medical personnel from combat zones entirely. Director Vasquez waited for the noise to die down before speaking again. There is another option. The chamber fell silent. Everyone present had been briefed on humanity's hidden history, but the topic was rarely discussed openly. 300 years ago, when humanity first made contact with galactic civilization, we made certain agreements. We agreed to suppress the more violent aspects of our culture. We agreed to disband certain organizations that the galaxy found disturbing. We agreed to present ourselves as a peaceful species interested in trade and cooperation. Vasquez activated a holographic display showing military records from Earth's pre-contact period. Images of burned cities, devastated battlefields, and captured war criminals filled the air above the assembly. But we never actually eliminated these elements. We simply relocated them, gave them new identities, and assigned them to monitoring positions throughout human space. For 3 centuries, they have been waiting, training, preparing for the day when their particular skills might be needed again. Representative Martinez from the Belt Colonies leaned forward. You're talking about the War Crimes Division. Vasquez nodded. Among others, the Enhanced Interrogation Specialists, the Psychological Warfare Corps, the Strategic Terror Units, the Civilian Target Specialists. Every organization and individual that we officially disbanded when we joined galactic civilization. The chamber was completely silent now. These were names that appeared in no official records, organizations that existed in the shadows of human space. Director, said Representative Chin quietly, are you suggesting we unleash war criminals against the Zephyrians? I'm suggesting we stop pretending that humanity is something we're not, Vasquez replied. The Zephyrians have violated the most sacred laws of galactic warfare. They have targeted healers, murdered medical personnel, and declared war on the concept of mercy itself. They believe humanity is weak because we choose to heal rather than harm. She paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled representatives. They're about to learn that we didn't evolve to be weak. We evolved to be the most efficient predators on a planet full of deadly creatures. We spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing our own species. We wrote manuals on torture, developed sciences of cruelty, and turned warfare into a form of art. We chose to suppress that nature when we joined galactic civilization. But choice can be revoked. Admiral Harrison stood again. Director, what exactly are you proposing? Vasquez activated another holographic display, this one showing personnel files that had been sealed for 3 centuries. Operation Pandora's Box. We release our war criminals from their civilian covers and give them carte blanche to respond to Zephyrian aggression using any methods they deem appropriate. The first file showed a middle-aged man who appeared to be a simple agricultural engineer on one of the frontier worlds. His real name was Colonel Viktor Petrov, formerly of the Siberian Pacification Corps. His specialty was psychological warfare designed to break enemy morale through targeted civilian terror campaigns. The second file revealed a kindly-looking woman who ran a refugee center on New Geneva. Her actual identity was Major Lisa Chan, architect of the Mumbai siege strategy that had resulted in the surrender of an entire enemy nation through systematic destruction of their cultural and religious sites. File after file revealed human civilians who were, in reality, some of the most dangerous individuals in the galaxy. They had spent 3 centuries hiding in plain sight, their skills dormant, but not forgotten. These individuals, Vasquez continued, represent humanity's capacity for total warfare. They understand concepts that most galactic species have never encountered. Strategic terror, collective punishment, psychological destruction, the systematic elimination of enemy will to fight through the application of calculated horror. Representative Singh looked pale. Director, are you seriously suggesting we commit atrocities against the Zephyrians? I'm suggesting we remind the galaxy why humans were once considered the most dangerous species in known space, Vasquez replied calmly. The Zephyrians have declared war on medical neutrality. They have chosen to target healers. They think this makes them strong, that it gives them an advantage. She gestured to the holographic files floating around the chamber. They're about to discover that humanity's greatest strength was never our ability to heal. It was our ability to kill efficiently, creatively, and without mercy when circumstances required it. They want to fight a war without rules. They're about to face an enemy that wrote the book on fighting dirty. Admiral Harrison accessed his personal files and added them to the holographic display. If we're doing this, I have assets of my own to contribute. The Omega Protocol units have been maintaining their training and equipment for 300 years. New files appeared, showing individuals and units that existed in the deepest shadows of human military structure. These were the specialists in wet work, assassination, sabotage, and terror operations. They had continued to exist in complete secrecy, preparing for the day when conventional warfare might not be sufficient. "The question," said Director Vasquez, "is whether this assembly has the courage to unleash humanity's true nature. The Zephyrians have murdered our healers. They have violated every law of civilized warfare. Are we prepared to show them what human warfare looks like when we stop trying to be civilized?" The vote was called immediately. One by one, representatives from across human space registered their decisions. The final tally was overwhelming: 847 votes in favor, 23 against, 12 abstentions. Within hours, coded transmissions began flowing out from Earth to every corner of human space. On frontier worlds, agricultural engineers received new orders and opened sealed weapons caches. On refugee stations, humanitarian workers accessed hidden communication networks and began planning operations that had been theorized but never implemented. In the depths of space, unmarked ships changed course toward Zephyrian space. Their crews consisted of individuals who officially didn't exist, carrying weapons that violated numerous galactic treaties. Colonel Viktor Petrov stood in his farmhouse on New Rostov, looking at the transmission that had just arrived. After 3 centuries of pretending to care about crop rotation and soil nutrients, he was finally going back to work. He opened a hidden panel in his basement and began assembling equipment that he had hoped never to use again. Major Lisa Chun closed her refugee center on New Geneva and activated a communication network that connected her to similar specialists across human space. Within hours, they were planning psychological warfare operations designed to break Zephyrian morale through systematic terror. On Earth, Director Vasquez stood in her office, looking out at the peaceful cityscape below. Tomorrow, ships would begin launching toward Zephyrian space, carrying humanity's most dangerous secrets. The galaxy was about to remember why humans had once been feared. She thought about Dr. Sarah Chun and the other medical personnel who had died for the crime of trying to heal. Their deaths would not be in vain. The Zephyrians had wanted a war without rules. They were about to get one. In the deepest archives of human space, automated systems began unsealing files that contained detailed studies of species psychology, detailed plans for targeting civilian populations, and comprehensive strategies for total warfare. These documents represented thousands of years of human experience in the systematic destruction of enemies. The Zephyrians had made one critical error in their strategic thinking. They had assumed that humanity's choice to be peaceful meant that humanity had forgotten how to be otherwise. They were about to learn that evolution doesn't forget, that predatory instincts don't disappear simply because they're not used, that the most dangerous humans were those who chose to be gentle, because that choice implied they were capable of being something else entirely. The war criminals were being released from their civilian covers. The specialists in terror and psychological warfare were returning to active duty. The individuals who understood the science of cruelty were preparing to remind the galaxy why humans had once been the most feared species in known space. The Zephyrians had targeted humanity's medics. Now they were going to meet humanity's killers. The first sign that something had changed came from the Zephyrian mining colony on Terminus 7. The automated distress beacon triggered at exactly 0347 local time, broadcasting the standard emergency codes before cutting off abruptly. When the Colonial Defense Force arrived 6 hours later, they found the entire facility intact but completely abandoned. No bodies, no signs of struggle, no indication of what had happened to the 3,000 Zephyrian workers and their families. The mining equipment continued operating normally, extracting precious metals from the asteroid belt as if nothing had happened. But every single inhabitant had simply vanished. The only clue was a message spray-painted on the main administrative building in perfect Zephyrian script. The healers you murdered had families too. Admiral Krextos of the Zephyrian War Fleet reviewed the report with growing unease. In 40 years of military service, he had never encountered anything like this. Entire populations didn't just disappear without explanation. Any response from our intelligence networks? He asked his aide. Negative, Admiral. No human fleet movements detected in this sector. No evidence of human military presence at all. Our deep space monitors show normal civilian traffic only. CREX-TOS studied the tactical display showing Zephyrian space. Terminus 7 was deep within their territory, protected by multiple defense grids and patrol routes. For humans to reach it undetected would require technology and tactics far beyond what their intelligence assessments suggested humanity possessed. Sir, his communications officer announced, we're receiving reports from the Draxus mining station. Similar circumstances, complete evacuation, no signs of violence, all personnel missing. Then came reports from 3 more colonies. Then 7. By the end of the day, 12 Zephyrian installations had been found empty. Their populations vanished without explanation. The pattern was always the same. No violence, no destruction, just complete disappearance of every living being. The psychological effect on remaining Zephyrian colonies was immediate and devastating. Workers began refusing to report for shifts. Families demanded evacuation to the core worlds. Military units requested reinforcement for threats they couldn't identify or understand. On Earth, Director Vasquez watched the reports with grim satisfaction. The Psychological Warfare Corps was performing exactly as expected. The disappearances were just the opening move in a campaign designed to destroy Zephyrian morale through calculated terror. Colonel Viktor Petrov sat in the command center of an unmarked vessel deep in Zephyrian space, studying psychological profiles compiled over 3 centuries of observation. The Zephyrians were a hierarchical species with strong community bonds and deep cultural fears about isolation and abandonment. The mass disappearances were targeting their most fundamental anxieties. Phase 1 complete, he reported to his superiors. Zephyrian civilian morale is degrading ahead of projections. Recommend proceeding to Phase 2. Phase 2 began with the discovery of the missing Zephyrian colonists. They were found on uninhabited worlds scattered throughout neutral space, alive but profoundly changed. Medical examinations revealed they had been subjected to intensive psychological conditioning. They remembered nothing of their captivity except recurring nightmares about human faces and voices speaking in their native language about the medical personnel who had been murdered. The returned colonists carried implanted memories designed to spread through Zephyrian society like a virus. They spoke obsessively about human capabilities they claimed to have witnessed, technologies that could make entire fleets invisible, weapons that could kill from impossible distances, soldiers who moved like ghosts through solid matter. None of it was true, but the Zephyrians had no way to know that. The implanted memories were perfectly crafted to exploit their species' specific psychological vulnerabilities. Major Lisa Chun monitored the psychological warfare campaign from her hidden base on the edge of Zephyrian space. Her specialty was cultural destruction, the systematic undermining of enemy society through targeted strikes against their most cherished beliefs and institutions. The Zephyrians worshipped their war heroes, maintaining elaborate memorial complexes on their homeworld. Chin's teams infiltrated these sites and began subtle alterations. Memorial inscriptions were changed to commemorate defeats instead of victories. Heroic statues were modified to suggest cowardice or betrayal. Historical records were altered to cast doubt on the legitimacy of famous military leaders. The changes were small, almost unnoticeable, but they accumulated over time. Zephyrian society began experiencing a crisis of confidence in their own history and traditions. Veterans protested that their service was being dishonored. Religious leaders complained that sacred sites were being desecrated by unknown forces. Meanwhile, the Omega Protocol units had begun their own operations. Unlike the psychological warfare specialists, these individuals focused on direct action. They infiltrated Zephyrian military installations and began systematic sabotage operations. Weapons malfunctioned during training exercises, injuring Zephyrian soldiers. Navigation computers developed mysterious errors that sent ships off course into dangerous regions of space. Communication systems began broadcasting human music and poetry on military frequencies, filling Zephyrian command networks with alien voices reading Earth literature. The sabotage was precisely calculated to appear random while maximizing psychological impact. Zephyrian military efficiency degraded as soldiers began to distrust their equipment, and commanders lost confidence in their ability to maintain operational security. But the true masterstroke came when humanity's war criminals began targeting Zephyrian military leadership directly. The enhanced interrogation specialists had identified key figures in the Zephyrian command structure responsible for ordering attacks on medical personnel. General Vexthal, who had personally commanded the attack on Dr. Sarah Chin's hospital ship, disappeared from his flagship during a routine patrol. He was found 3 days later on an abandoned space station, alive but broken. He claimed that humans had subjected him to interrogation techniques that made him experience the deaths of every medical professional he had ordered killed, feeling their pain and terror as if it were his own. Admiral Kexmore, who had authorized the systematic targeting of medical facilities, was discovered in his own quarters, catatonic and repeating human names in a continuous whisper. Medical examination revealed no physical injuries, but his mind had been shattered by exposure to techniques that existed nowhere in Zephyrian experience. One by one, every Zephyrian officer who had participated in attacks on medical personnel was visited by humanities specialists. They weren't killed. That would have been too simple. Instead, they were broken, transformed into living examples of what happened when humans were pushed beyond their limits. The Galactic Council finally took notice when the Zephyrian government formally requested intervention, claiming they were under attack by forces they couldn't identify or counter. Ambassador Tala from the Centauran Union demanded an explanation from the human delegation. Ambassador Sarah Martinez, who had replaced the previous human representative, listened calmly to the accusations. She was a career diplomat who had spent 30 years negotiating trade agreements and cultural exchanges. She was also the sister of Dr. Marcus Webb, the refugee camp doctor who had been executed by Zephyrian forces. The Galactic Council expresses concern about alleged human activities in Zephyrian space. She replied with diplomatic precision. However, I must point out that these allegations lack evidence. The Zephyrian claims describe capabilities and tactics that are inconsistent with known human military doctrine. Ambassador Tala gestured to the reports floating in the chamber's holographic display. Entire colonies have vanished without explanation. Military leaders have been subjected to unknown psychological torture. Zephyrian society is experiencing systematic cultural sabotage. Are you claiming human forces are not responsible? Martinez smiled with the cold precision of someone who had learned diplomacy from humanity's finest manipulators. The human government categorically denies any involvement in illegal activities within Zephyrian space. We continue to operate under the authority of the Galactic Geneva Convention and maintain our commitment to medical neutrality. She paused, letting the irony sink in. Of course, we must note that the Zephyrian Collective has formally declared medical neutrality void within their space. They have systematically murdered medical personnel and destroyed hospital ships. Under these circumstances, it becomes difficult to determine what constitutes legal or illegal activity. The chamber erupted in argument as various species debated the implications. Some demanded investigations into human activities. Others pointed out that the Zephyrians had violated fundamental galactic law by targeting medical personnel. While the politicians argued, humanities war criminals continued their operations. The civilian target specialists began their own campaign, identifying Zephyrian population centers that supported the military's anti-medical policies. They didn't attack these cities directly. That would have violated human principles regarding civilian casualties. Instead, they systematically undermined the infrastructure that made modern Zephyrian life possible. Power grids experienced cascading failures that left cities dark for weeks. Water treatment facilities developed mysterious contamination problems that forced mass evacuations. Transportation networks were disrupted by computer viruses that turned routine travel into dangerous unpredictability. The attacks were designed to make normal life impossible while avoiding direct civilian casualties. Zephyrian populations fled their cities and colonies, creating massive refugee crises that overwhelmed their government's ability to respond. Within 6 months, Zephyrian society was in complete collapse. Their military was paralyzed by equipment failures and shattered leadership. Their civilian population was in constant flight from invisible threats. Their culture was fragmenting under the weight of systematic psychological assault. The final blow came when Colonel Petrov activated the ultimate psychological weapon. Using captured Zephyrian communication networks, his teams began broadcasting a simple message throughout their space. It was Dr. Sarah Chen's final transmission, played continuously on every frequency, in every Zephyrian city, in perfect translation. The Zephyrians think they understand humanity. They think we're weak because we choose healing over violence. They're about to learn that we chose to be healers. That doesn't mean we forgot how to be killers. The message played for 72 hours straight, impossible to block or silence. Every Zephyrian in their territory heard it, over and over, until it became burned into their collective consciousness. On the fourth day, the Zephyrian government sent an unconditional surrender to the Galactic Council. They agreed to immediate cessation of all hostilities against Altarian colonies, reparations for medical personnel killed during their campaign, and formal acknowledgement of medical neutrality as inviolable galactic law. More importantly, they requested that humanity's hidden forces cease their activities and return to whatever shadows they had emerged from. Director Vasquez stood in her office on Earth, reading the surrender document with satisfaction. Around human space, coded transmissions went out recalling the war criminals to their civilian covers. Agricultural engineers returned to their farms. Refugee coordinators reopened their humanitarian centers. The specialists in terror and psychological warfare disappeared back into the normal population of human space. The galaxy had been reminded of something it had chosen to forget. Humanity's choice to be peaceful was exactly that, a choice. And choices could be revoked when circumstances required it. The Zephyrians had targeted humanity's medics, thinking it would give them an advantage. Instead, they had awakened something in humanity that they had kept carefully controlled for 3 centuries. The healers would continue their work throughout the galaxy, protected once again by the universal recognition that medical neutrality was sacred. But every species would remember that behind humanity's gentle exterior lay the capacity for warfare so sophisticated and ruthless that it could destroy entire civilizations without firing a single shot. Dr. Sarah Chun and her fellow medical professionals had not died in vain. Their sacrifice had demonstrated that some lines could not be crossed, some principles could not be violated, and some choices carried consequences that lasted for generations. Humanity had shown the galaxy its true face, and the galaxy would never forget what it had seen.